nice article in the Managing Madrid blog. Wonderful lads that do a great job there. And worth reading about that man there. Karim Benzema needs to rest, and the numbers reveal why.
Times ended up almost looking like a 6-3-1. Some very good writing about that on the Managing Madrid website. First-rate podcast as well. Of course, Fede Valverde was a huge part of the equation.
Welcome, everyone, to the Managing Madrid podcast. It's a special day. It's a big day at the Bernabeu. We are joined by our good friend, Alex Kirkland of ESPN FC of the Spanish Football Podcast, a great friend of the show over the years. Alex, it's great to see your face. It's been a big day, man. Walk us through it. What are the vibes like?
Yeah, it's my pleasure to be here, man. Mbappe finished speaking literally seconds ago in the press conference room here at the Bernabeu, and I'm sat in a little room just next to the press conference room. I've dived in here to get a relative bit of peace and quiet away from the throng of journalists. I've never seen the press conference room here as busy as this. I've been here for Champions League semi-finals and all sorts, and this is as busy as I've ever seen it here. It was a pretty special day. I mean, the overwhelming emotion for me, I don't know about you watching it, but being here was just how ready Mbappe is for this moment. He's been ready for this for a long time, right? He's been preparing for this pretty much all his life. It seems like I've been sort of building up to this moment. That's certainly the impression that he gives, and the way that he conducts himself. Of course, the presser is what's freshest in my mind right now because it just finished. He conducted all of it in, I mean, basically flawless Spanish, like really, really good Spanish. Not perfect, but as close to perfect as you could possibly expect it to be, given that he's never lived and worked here on a daily basis. We know why is that? That's because he's been preparing for this day, for this moment, for years and years and years. The way that he speaks is hugely impressive. You can there's nothing particularly surprising, I guess, about the message that he's trying to kind of send, which is talking about he talked about sort of the two values of this club being humility and ambition, those two things going together. I guess he would like to think those two things sort of define him as well. He kept talking about, his first priority is adapting to the team. He's not thinking about kind of anything beyond that, beyond adapting to the team, what the team wants, what the coach wants. He wouldn't get into, what position he wants to play in and stuff like that. He said he'll play wherever the boss wants him to play. It's no problem. He talked about sort of the players that he's been in touch with already, Madrid players who've been in touch with him over the years, sort of encouraging him to come and telling him how great it is to come and play here. Talked about playing with people like Vinicius and being in touch with them. Talked about his idols, who we know his two sort of biggest idols are Cristiano Ronaldo and Zinedine Zidane. Zidane was here today, of course, which was a big moment, a special moment for him to be here, especially given the way that he left as coach. He talked about watching Cristiano Ronaldo's presentation as a kid. That of course was 15 years ago this summer. That Ronaldo presentation was it set the benchmark, right, for sort of player presentations and how big they can be. Full Bernabeu, I think 85,000 people were there that day. Not quite as many people were here today, I think. There are a couple of sort of blocks of the stadium behind each of the goals that were empty. And there were a few sort of empty seats dotted around, but I think we're talking about 70,000 people, something like that, were here. They were queuing here for hours before the gates even opened, before midday. And it was a really lovely atmosphere. It felt a bit like a match day, coming up to the stadium beforehand, but it was all about one guy. It was about the Mbappe shirts and the Mbappe scarves and Mbappe face masks and all of that. It felt significant. It was very, what Real Madrid are like, right? They're sort of old school, the way that they do things. So the presentation, it was sort of classic Real Madrid. There wasn't too much. Other clubs, there might have been maybe more fireworks, like literal fireworks or, metaphorical fireworks. And, I guess you could have done it maybe at night with lights and stuff like that. But there was none of that. This is Real Madrid. We don't necessarily do that sort of thing. Do you know what I mean? It was very sort of traditional. It was nice to be back at the stadium for a player presentation. Of course, the last few years with COVID and with the works here and everything else, this has been done at Valdebebas. So it was nice to be back here at the stadium for this one.
This felt very much like old school Real Madrid, Alex, like growing up, watching the Galacticos and then thinking back to 2009 Cristiano Ronaldo. You remember what it was like pre-pandemic with all the seats filled. It felt like, wow, just the way they do things that are not even game related or trophy related, they can make a spectacle. in a way that I don't think any other club can. And the Bernabeu obviously has become a hub, right? Of
Yeah.
events. We had a big event the other day. We had the Taylor Swift thing. So it just feels like there's just a happening spot right now.
It is different. And look, I say that I'm not a Real Madrid fan. This is my job to cover this club. But yeah, I think you have to accept that is, even as a non-fan, that is the case, that this club is special. This club is different. The way they do things, the scale they can do things on, no one else can really come close. And you see it in days like today when you've got 70,000 people turning out for a player presentation. And the Bernabeu, it's very, very close to being finished now. There's still a few sort of finishing touches, but it's very close to being done. It looks amazing. From that huge wraparound screen at the top of the stadium, right the way down, the way the outside's looking as well. It's come on quite a bit since the last time I was here, a couple of months ago. So the Bernabeu it's looking fantastic, and it was built for moments like this. Like you say, it's now basically become sort of like the idea is it's sort of a 365 day a year, entertainment sort of hub, right? And you've had these concerts, which I haven't been at any yet, but they look incredible when you see the footage of the concerts here. Of course, that's a big kind of revenue driver for the club as well. And it was built for days like today. I mean, you talk about sort of growing up and watching the Galacticos and watching the Ronaldo presentation. The great thing about Mbappe, of course, is that he did that too. He grew up watching this stuff. He talked about that just now. He talked about growing up, and he was asked what are your sort of earliest Real Madrid memories. He said probably Zidane. He said, Zidane was sort of his first hero, and he remembers watching Zidane's games. And then he said, basically from the arrival of Cristiano Ronaldo onwards, he used to watch sort of all of the games. He says, he's a Real Madrid fan, and that's why he made such an effort to come here. We know that it hasn't been easy. We know it's been a long sort of road, a long journey. That was mentioned as well in the speeches in the stadium earlier. Florentino Perez talked about how he basically thanked Kylian for the effort you've sort of made, for the sacrifices that you've made, because he has had to work hard at this, and he came under incredible pressure not to come here, and that sort of delayed this moment, didn't it, by years really, because we could have been here in 2021 or 2022 or 2023, but here we are in 2024. So that's interesting too.
It's funny because when you think of his journey here and the amount of money he took from PSG to not come to Real Madrid in 2022, the word sacrifice is not the word you would typically think of, right? But it was telling, where I think at some point, and you would remember this better than me maybe, I think he said something along the lines of like, we won, we made it here. And like, what do you think it was over the last couple of years, really? Because today he was very smart in not being too revealing, but also being candid enough to state that I would have been here 2 years ago if not for how difficult it was to actually come here. Beyond the money, Alex, the pressure, all that in the last couple of years, what do you think it was?
Huge pressure, political pressure, from the very top of the French state, sort of downwards, basically. He was asked about that in the press conference just now. He was asked, did you ever doubt? Was there a moment where you thought, okay, this might not actually happen? And he said, no. He said, I never doubted that I would end up at Real Madrid one day. He said, of course, you know what football's like. Things happen in football, and there are things that are outside of your control. But he said, no, I never doubted that at some point I would end up playing for Real Madrid. But there was so much pressure, and I know it sounds strange to talk about kind of sacrificing effort when talking about players that earn this much money, right, and have such privileged lives. I think he's quite sort of aware of that, because he seems like quite a very self-aware guy as well. But like I say, I think he did have to make an effort to get here, and had to make some relatively tough decisions along the way. Would we have liked this day to come a bit earlier? Yeah, sure we would. We would have loved to have him here a couple of years ago. But it feels a little bit surreal, actually, that I don't know about you, but that it's happened now, because we've been thinking about this and talking about this for so long. And it's at times it felt like it might never happen. So it felt that moment when he stepped out onto the pitch for the first time today, wearing the full kit, waving to the crowd, kissing the badge. It felt to me a little bit surreal.
Even still, it feels like it's not real, just because it's been so many years of we think he's a player, he's almost a player, and then something happens. The Spanish speaking part of it, Alex, did that you're around a ton of Spanish media there in the press room. Did it catch anyone off guard? Were they surprised?
You could, yes, because I think we knew that he speaks he speaks some Spanish, but you're never quite sure. I don't know if we've ever heard him speak at that sort of length in Spanish before, because this was a long press conference. They took questions from, a lot of the media. I don't know if it was half an hour or maybe even more. I wasn't keeping track, but it was a long time, and almost all of it was in Spanish, with a few questions from the sort of the traveling French press pack as well. And no, you could tell people were impressed. People were surprised and impressed, and it's one way to win people over. If you show that you've sort of made that effort and you've put that level of preparation in, which most players do not do. I can't ever remember a foreign player arriving here with that level of Spanish right off the bat ever.
No.
It's really impressive, and you can tell that people are like, oh wow, okay, yeah. In fact, a few people said it. A few journalists said it sort of either as sort of the main sort of thrust of their questions, or they just said, oh yeah, well done on the Spanish, by the way. And he was asked a bit about, where does that come from? He said, look, I started at school. And he said, I wasn't the best kid at school, but with Spanish, I made an effort. And he said, because this was, my dream was to come here. And like I say, it's very calculated. He knew that he was going to be here in this press conference room one day. And he wanted to make sure that when he did that, he could conduct the press conference in almost entirely in Spanish. And he pulled that off, incredibly well. I think it's so as someone who has lived here a long time and has worked and struggled to improve my Spanish on a daily basis, I know how hard it is. Especially in a public forum, right? Yes, a player like him is used to speaking in public, but still, it's still not easy. It's still not easy to do that. And yeah, I think it's very, very impressive.
That's what struck me too, Alex. Like, I know, like, speaking Spanish is not a footballing ability. It's not something we're going to reflect on as to, like, why.
No, but it's relevant on the pitch, right? It's important. And you think about just, simple day-to-day stuff about interactions with the coach and with teammates. I think it makes a huge difference to have that level of fluency. I mean, he talked about, look, he's had Spanish-speaking coaches, of course, at PSG, Luis Enrique, Pochettino. He's had some teammates as well, so he's had that practice. But no, I do think it's not. I'm sorry to interrupt, but this is the point that you're making, that it's not just cosmetic, right? It is important in terms of sort of PR, but it's not just that. I think there's also real kind of practical implications to having that fluency as well.
That, and also I think it showed a mentality side to me, like. Something that stood out to me in today's press conference, like even all the things he said about, like, there were some questions about Vinicius' tactical fit, and other things, but the nose surgeries. But he said, I knew that one day I would be a Real Madrid player. I'm paraphrasing. So that this possibility of really needing to know Spanish was very real for me at a young age because of this. So, like, that was the kind of preparation that was, like, implanted in his brain for years and years, and that this is, like, why I need to sharpen it. And it's also, as you may know, it's one thing to maybe know how to speak Spanish or understand Spanish, but it's another thing to speak it, and it's another thing to speak it when the whole world is watching. It's
and understanding as well, like, the speed that some Spanish people speak Spanish with. And I heard it with one or two of the questions here, where you notice people, some people sort of take care to sort of moderate how they're speaking and speak a little bit more slowly and enunciate a bit more clearly, which is always appreciated, but not everyone does. And most of the questions he was listening to and understanding on his own. Every now and then he would sort of resort to the translator just to catch some nuance or make sure he'd understood what the question was. But largely that wasn't the case. Yeah, I think it's another expression of just, I think he's such a sort of single-minded individual, right? And you can see that sort of throughout his career in terms of knowing what he wants and then making it happen. That sort of mentality. And I think that's the sort of mentality that fits right in here, as we see with players like Bellingham and others.
How do you see this all working now, Alex? To, like, ask you a more big picture question. We don't know if he's going to be in the US as of now.
Yeah, he wouldn't say, but I mean, that would be a huge surprise. I think because he can't say no, because it's not necessarily his place to say no. But I think when he talked about targeting the UEFA Super Cup, I think that that's a more realistic aspiration.
Yeah. And how do you see it working on the pitch? Do you have something envisioned in your mind on how it works?
Yeah, I can see him scoring like 40 goals or something a season. I don't know. I know that some people have doubts and questions, and they're legitimate doubts about how it's going to work tactically, how he's going to fit in, exactly what position he's going to play in. But I don't know, man. I know also that there've been some doubts about his performance level at the Euros, say, but I still look at him and say that when he's right and he's fit and he's got this nose thing behind him, he's still one of the absolute best, and I think he's going to absolutely tear it up. Like you never know. Of course, there are so many factors, but I would just be absolutely staggered if playing for this team with those players around him, if he doesn't score heartfuls of goals. I'd be absolutely amazed.
It's one of those things too. Like people look at him as having a down year, especially with the Euros and the broken nose. He had a
But he
career
just
high
had
in
his best.
goals.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. It's pretty crazy. I mean, I'm really looking forward to it. I think this is much different than the 2003 Galacticos, where you kept adding and it was too top heavy and there was a lack of balance, or even Messi and Mbappe and Neymar at PSG. I feel like this team has a stronger spine, more tactical balance, and also the perfect manager to mesh this all together. If you ask me, someone who can actually put these egos together.
Yeah, the one thing, I mean, my one big question mark, I don't know what you think about this, but I want to see what they do without Cross, and I want to see how the team is sort of rebuilt with that. I think he was obviously so important to the way that the team kind of functions, and there isn't another player who can do exactly what he does. And so I'm interested to see, what the impact of that is and how Ancelotti looks to compensate for that, and sort of what the first choice kind of midfield 3 or 4 is. I think that's going to be really interesting. And it's a shame in a way that we won't see Cross, providing sort of through balls for Mbappe, because how many goals, would you have seen like that? You think about the, say the Vinicius goal against Bayern last season, you can just imagine Mbappe on the end of that with that kind of movement, can't you? So that's a shame. But that's the one sort of big doubt or question mark that I've got. But other stuff, I don't know. I'm not that worried about stuff like how he plays with Vinicius or Rodrigo or that sort of thing. I think they and Ancelotti will figure it out. I don't think that's too much of a problem.
We got a couple minutes left, possibly less if Alex gets kicked out of the Bernabeu.
We're good for now. We're good. We're not the only ones here. I'm not the last one left. Yeah.
I've sat in that exact room once, and then I thought it was good, and then 30 seconds later they came in and they were like, you gotta go. Is there anything else that stood out to you, whether it's from the presentation, maybe before, like the walk to the stadium, the crowds outside, like anything?
I mean, the other big thing, I guess, is that this is, as well as being Mbappe's day, this is Florentino Perez's day, isn't it? And the fact that this was such sort of a long-term project and goal of his was to bring this player here and to have this day, and he's got it now. And of course, it's one of many achievements that he's been responsible for at this club. But the fact that it's also his day, you heard the crowd sort of chanting his name as if he was a player, and sort of having his moment and his sort of that's the other thing. It's sort of I don't know. I don't know where to rank it in terms of, how do you rank? I don't know how you rank Florentino's achievements, because everything that he's done is very, very difficult. But the fact that the sort of the perseverance to bring this to fruition finally in the role that he played, and Mbappe talked about sort of the personal role that the president had played in this. I think that's huge as well.
Listeners, we wanted to just give you guys a heads up. If you want some more videos and photos of today's presentation, some clips, some whatever, go to managingmadrid.com or follow Managing Madrid on Twitter. It's all there. Also, make sure to follow Alex's work. He does an amazing job over at TSFP. You can follow them on Twitter, ESPNFC. You can catch him. If you're in North America, you'll be lucky enough to see Alex on the halftime shows on ESPN as well.
I'll be on tonight. I'll be on tonight on ESPNFC talking about today, and I'm writing about today for the site as well. So that'll be up at some point later on today.
Can we get a time? Let's tune in. What time are you going to?
Well, so I'm on FC. So Spanish time is like 11:15 p.m. So whatever time that is, Eastern time.
That's about, I think, 5:15.
Or something. So I'll be live then, and the piece on the site should be up by then as well.
Beautiful. Alex, appreciate your time. Thank you so much. I know you got a busy day and it wasn't easy for you to do this, so I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
That's my pleasure, man. Thanks for the invitation.